They say trust is earned, but I learned the hard way that some people see trust as an invitation to steal. My daughter-in-law smiled sweetly as she helped me set up online banking, claiming it would make my life easier. What I didn't know was that she was making her own life easier, at my expense. For months I watched my pension disappear while she bought designer handbags and weekend getaways, thinking I was too old and trusting to notice. But when you've spent 40 years as a forensic accountant, numbers don't lie. And when I finally connected the dots, I realized she'd picked the wrong old lady to steal from. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even with compound interest. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When my husband Robert died last October, the silence in our Phoenix home became unbearable. 43 years of marriage don't just end, they echo through empty hallways and untouched coffee cups, through his reading chair that still held the shape of his body, and the morning crossword puzzles I could no longer bear to finish alone. The grief counselor said isolation was dangerous at my age, that I needed family support and social connection. She was right about needing support. She was wrong about who I could trust to provide it. My son Daniel called every few days at first, his voice careful and measured like he was walking on glass. He worked as an engineering manager for a tech company in Scottsdale, lived in one of those sprawling suburban developments where every house looked like it had been ordered from the same catalog. His wife Jessica was a real estate agent, successful, ambitious, the kind of woman who wore heels to grocery stores and never had a hair out of place. They'd been married 5 years, had twin boys who were 7 now, and from the outside, everything looked picture perfect. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that house," Daniel said during one of his calls in November. "It's too big, too quiet. You need to be around people who care about you." The conversation happened gradually, over several weeks. Not pressure, exactly, but gentle persistence. Jessica would get on the phone sometimes, her voice bright and welcoming. "We have that beautiful guest suite downstairs, Mrs. Harrison. It has its own entrance, complete privacy. You'd be helping us too. The boys adore their grandmother, and I could use an extra pair of hands with them." I wasn't naive. I knew that moving in with adult children rarely worked out perfectly. But the alternative was staying in a house that felt like a museum of memories I wasn't ready to revisit every day. The practical side of me, the side that had balanced budgets and managed investments for decades, recognized that selling the Phoenix house made financial sense too. The market was strong, property taxes were climbing, and maintaining a 4-bedroom home on my pension income was becoming increasingly difficult. In December, we made it official. I sold the house to a young couple with small children who promised to love it the way Robert and I had. I packed my life into moving boxes, keeping only the essentials. My books, my jewelry, Robert's watch, the photo albums that chronicled our life together, and the important documents I'd always kept in a fireproof safe. The rest went to charity or to Daniel and Jessica's house. Furniture they said they could use, kitchen items that would come in handy for entertaining. The guest suite really was beautiful. Jessica had decorated it in soft blues and grays, with a queen-sized bed, a small sitting area, and a compact kitchenette. The bathroom had a walk-in shower with safety bars, and there was even a small patio that overlooked their backyard pool. It felt like moving into a high-end extended-stay hotel, complete with fresh flowers on the dresser and Egyptian cotton towels folded neatly in the linen closet. "We want you to feel completely at home here," Jessica said, showing me where everything was on my first day. "This is your space, your sanctuary. No one will bother you unless you want company." The boys, Michael and Tyler, were delightful. 7-year-olds with boundless energy and Daniel's same curious brown eyes. They loved having me there, knocking on my door in the afternoons to show me their drawings or to beg for stories about their father when he was their age. I taught them to play chess and helped them with their homework, and in those moments, surrounded by their laughter and chatter, the loneliness that had consumed me since Robert's death finally began to lift. Jessica seemed genuinely grateful for my help too. She worked long hours, often showing houses in the evenings or on weekends, and having me there meant she didn't have to worry about after-school care or last-minute babysitting. I picked the boys up from school, helped them with their homework, started dinner when she was running late. It felt good to be useful again, to have a purpose beyond just getting through each day. "I don't know how we managed without you," she said one evening in January, after I'd handled both boys' bedtime routine while she closed a particularly difficult sale. "You're a lifesaver, Mom Harrison. Seriously." That's what she called me, Mom Harrison. Never just Mom, which I understood. She had her own mother, after all. But the formality of it sometimes made me feel like a polite stranger rather than family. The financial arrangements seemed straightforward enough. I was contributing to household expenses, utilities, groceries, my share of the property taxes. My pension from the state of Arizona, combined with Robert's Social Security benefits and the money from selling the house, left me comfortable but not wealthy. I'd always been careful with money, conservative in my investments, and I planned to leave whatever remained to Daniel and the boys when my time came. It was Jessica who suggested setting up online banking for me in February. "It's so much easier than writing checks or going to the bank in person," she explained, sitting beside me at the kitchen table with her laptop open. "You can see all your accounts in one place, transfer money instantly, even set up automatic payments for your regular bills. My mother loves it, says it gives her so much more control over her finances." The technology intimidated me, I'll admit. I'd always managed money the old-fashioned way: checkbooks, paper statements, face-to-face conversations with my banker. But Jessica was patient, walking me through each step slowly, helping me create usernames and passwords, showing me how to navigate between different accounts. "Now, for security," she said, typing rapidly on the keyboard, "you want to make sure your passwords are really strong. Let me help you set up something that's easy for you to remember, but hard for anyone else to guess." She used a combination of my maiden name, Robert's birthday, and our wedding anniversary. Looking back, I realized she was memorizing the information as she helped me create it. But at the time, her thoroughness felt like caring attention, like a daughter-in-law who wanted to make sure I was protected from online scams and identity theft. "There," she said, logging me into my main checking account for the first time. "See how easy that is? You can check your balance anytime, see exactly where your money is going. It's really empowering." The screen showed my account balance, my recent transactions, even a graph showing my spending patterns over the past few months. Jessica was right. It did feel empowering to have all that information at my fingertips. I thanked her for her patience and promised to practice using the system on my own. What I didn't realize was that she'd also quietly added her email address as a backup contact on my accounts, claiming it was a security feature in case I ever got locked out. What I didn't know was that this would give her access to all my financial notifications, including alerts about transfers and large purchases. What I couldn't have imagined was that this sweet, helpful daughter-in-law who'd just spent an hour teaching me about online security was already planning how to use that access against me. The first few weeks of online banking went smoothly. I checked my accounts regularly, marveling at how simple it was to see everything laid out so clearly. My pension deposits came in like clockwork on the first of each month. My automatic payments for insurance and other bills went out on schedule. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but in early March I began to notice small discrepancies. Nothing dramatic at first, just amounts that didn't quite match what I expected to see. A grocery store charge for $127, when I was certain I'd only spent about $80. A gas station transaction I didn't remember making. A charge from a restaurant I'd never been to. I mentioned it to Jessica casually one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. "Oh, that happens to me all the time," she said, barely looking up from loading the dishwasher. "Sometimes charges take a few days to process, or they get bundled together weird by the credit card companies. Plus, you know how it is. When you're adjusting to a new system, it's easy to lose track of small purchases." Her explanation made sense. I was still getting used to digital banking, still learning to match up my mental records with what appeared on screen. And she was right about charges processing strangely sometimes. I'd noticed that with my credit card statements in the past. But the discrepancies didn't stop. If anything, they seemed to be getting larger and more frequent. By the end of March, I was seeing charges I absolutely knew I hadn't made. Online purchases from stores I'd never heard of, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, even what appeared to be cash withdrawals from ATMs I'd never visited. That's when I began keeping a handwritten record of every penny I spent, noting the date, amount, and purpose of each transaction in a small notebook I carried in my purse. Call it old-fashioned, but 40 years of professional experience had taught me that when numbers don't add up, the problem isn't usually with your memory, it's with someone else's honesty. And as I compared my careful notes to my online statements, a sick feeling began growing in the pit of my stomach. Someone was stealing from me. Someone with access to my accounts, someone who knew my passwords, someone who was clever enough to hide their tracks among legitimate purchases and everyday expenses. Someone I trusted. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The transformation from suspicious grandmother to forensic investigator didn't happen overnight. It began with a yellow legal pad and a magnifying glass I'd kept in my desk drawer since Robert's death, tools I'd used for decades to untangle financial mysteries for insurance companies and law enforcement agencies. Old habits, it turns out, die harder than trust. I started by recreating 3 months of bank statements by hand, cross-referencing every digital transaction with my handwritten spending log. The work was tedious, requiring the kind of patience that comes only from years of professional training, but patterns began emerging like fingerprints at a crime scene. The fraudulent charges weren't random. They followed a schedule, clustering around specific dates each month, always in amounts small enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. April 3rd, $89.99 charged to Style Crave Boutique, an online clothing store I'd never heard of. April 8th, $156 withdrawal from an ATM in Old Town Scottsdale while I was home watching the boys. April 12th, $203.50 to Desert Rose Spa and Wellness, a luxury day spa I couldn't afford even if I'd wanted to visit. April 15th, $127.89 to Nordstrom Online for purchases I never made. Each entry in my notebook felt like another piece of evidence in a case I was building against someone I lived with, someone who asked about my day over dinner and bought me flowers for Easter. The cognitive dissonance was nauseating, my brain struggling to reconcile the Jessica who helped me set up my medication reminders with the person systematically draining my accounts. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in late April. Jessica had left early for a client meeting, Daniel was at work, and the boys were at school. I was alone in the house with unrestricted access to the family computer they kept in the kitchen, the same computer Jessica had used to help me set up my online banking. Modern browsers, I discovered, have a convenient feature that saves passwords and login information. With a few clicks, I found Jessica's saved login credentials for dozens of websites, including several I recognized from my fraudulent charges. Style Crave Boutique, Desert Rose Spa, various department stores and restaurants. But more importantly, I found something else. My own banking information, saved under Jessica's user profile. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked through her browser history. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Multiple visits to my bank's website from her computer. Searches for small transaction limits, fraud detection, and how to avoid banking alerts elderly accounts. Most disturbing of all, a bookmarked forum discussion titled Accessing Family Member Finances Legally, with dozens of replies about power of attorney, elder care responsibilities, and something called financial guardianship. I printed everything, page after page of browser history, saved passwords, forum discussions, and cached pages from shopping sites where my money had been spent. The printer in their home office hummed steadily for 20 minutes as I documented the digital trail Jessica had left behind. She'd been careful, but not careful enough to hide from someone who'd spent 4 decades tracking financial crimes. While the printer worked, I used Jessica's saved credentials to access the shopping accounts she'd created using my credit card information. The purchase histories read like an inventory of items I'd never owned. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, spa treatments, weekend hotel stays, even furniture for parts of the house I rarely visited. She'd been living upgraded lifestyle entirely funded by my pension and savings, treating my accounts like her personal credit line. The total amount stolen was staggering, $11,847 over the past 4 months. Nearly $12,000 of my retirement income, money I'd earned through decades of careful work, money Robert and I had saved for our later years, money that was supposed to provide security and dignity in my old age. She'd stolen not just cash, but my peace of mind, my ability to trust my own family. But the theft went deeper than money. As I scrolled through more of her online activity, I found email conversations with friends where she complained about having me in the house. "It's like having a babysitter for our babysitter," she'd written to someone named Melissa. "She's always there, always watching, always ready to help with things I don't need help with. Sometimes I feel like I'm being judged in my own home." Another message, this one to her sister, was even more revealing. "The money helps, though. She's got more in those accounts than she knows what to do with, and she's so trusting with the online banking stuff. It's almost like she wants someone else to handle the details." The casual cruelty of those words hit me harder than the theft itself. She hadn't just stolen from me, she'd convinced herself I deserved it, that I was somehow complicit in my own victimization. In her mind, my trust wasn't a gift but a character flaw, my presence in their home wasn't helpful but burdensome, and my money wasn't earned but excessive. I saved everything to a flash drive I found in Daniel's desk drawer. Screenshots, printed pages, saved passwords, email conversations, all of it carefully organized and labeled with dates and amounts. 40 years of professional training had taught me that evidence without organization is just chaos, and chaos doesn't hold up in court or family confrontations. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence. It was continuing to live normally while I processed what I'd discovered. That evening at dinner, Jessica asked about my day with the same cheerful concern she'd shown for months. I watched her cut the boys' chicken into small pieces, listened to her tell Daniel about a difficult client, smiled when she complimented the salad I'd made for lunch. "You seem quiet tonight, Mom Harrison," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Everything okay?" The touch of her fingers against mine felt like ice. Here was the hand that had typed my passwords, clicked purchase on items I'd never see, transferred money from accounts I'd trusted her to protect. Here was the woman who'd held my grandchildren with the same hands she'd used to steal from their grandmother. "Just tired," I managed, pulling my hand away gently. "It's been a long day." She nodded sympathetically. "You should get some rest. Don't worry about cleaning up. I've got it covered." I went to my room that night and sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the pool where the boys played every afternoon. The underwater lights cast moving patterns on the water's surface, and I watched them shift and change, while my mind processed the full scope of what I'd learned. Jessica wasn't just a thief. She was a sophisticated con artist who'd identified the perfect victim and the perfect cover story. An elderly widow adjusting to new technology, grateful for family support, living in their home where her financial activity could be monitored and controlled. She'd probably started planning the theft the moment Daniel first suggested I move in with them. But she'd made one crucial mistake in her victim selection. She'd assumed that my age and grief had dulled my professional instincts, that decades of forensic accounting experience would somehow evaporate in the face of family loyalty and technological intimidation. She'd mistaken my trust for ignorance, my gratitude for naivete. Over the next several days, I continued gathering evidence while maintaining my normal routine. I picked up the boys from school, helped with homework, prepared meals, and participated in family conversations as if nothing had changed. But internally, I was building a case with the same methodical precision I'd once used to expose embezzlement schemes and insurance fraud. I researched Jessica's real estate business, discovering that her recent successful sales weren't quite as successful as she'd led everyone to believe. Her commission income had dropped significantly over the past year, explaining why she'd been working longer hours and showing more desperation in her business activities. The stolen money wasn't funding luxuries, it was covering shortfalls, filling gaps in their family budget that Daniel probably didn't even know existed. The more I learned, the more I realized that confronting Jessica directly would be pointless. She'd already proven herself capable of sophisticated deception and manipulation. A simple accusation would likely result in denial, gaslighting, and possibly an attempt to turn Daniel against me. She might even claim I was becoming confused or paranoid, classic tactics used against elderly fraud victims. No, this situation required a different approach. Something more surgical, more proportional to the scope of her betrayal. Something that would not only recover my stolen money, but ensure that Jessica learned the true cost of underestimating a retired forensic accountant who'd spent 4 decades making white-collar criminals pay for their crimes. As I sat in my room that night organizing the evidence into neat manila folders, I began planning something Jessica would never see coming. She'd stolen my money, assuming I was too old, too trusting, and too technologically naive to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was on all 3 counts. The idea came to me on a Thursday morning while I was ironing Daniel's work shirts, a small domestic task I'd taken on to feel useful, though now I wondered if even my helpfulness was being exploited. As steam rose from the cotton fabric, I found myself thinking about access, opportunity, and the delicate architecture of modern financial systems. Jessica had used her proximity to me, her technological savvy, and my trust to commit her crimes. The question was, what did I have access to that she valued just as much as I valued my pension? The answer was sitting in a manila folder on Daniel's home office desk, filed under important documents, in a cabinet I'd helped him organize just 2 months earlier. His business financial records, investment accounts, and the savings he'd accumulated for the boys' college education. Daniel had always been meticulous about money, a trait he'd inherited from me, but he'd also inherited something else, the tendency to trust family members with sensitive information. I spent that morning conducting what I called reconnaissance, a term I'd learned during my consulting work with law enforcement agencies. While Jessica showed a house across town and Daniel attended a project meeting, I carefully photographed Daniel's financial documents with the camera on my phone. Bank statements, investment portfolios, his company's profit-sharing account, even the boys' education savings accounts that he and Jessica managed jointly. The numbers were substantial. Daniel had been successful in his engineering career, disciplined in his saving habits, and smart about his investments. His primary savings account contained $47,000. His retirement account held over $180,000. The boys' college funds totaled another $65,000. All told, the accounts I could potentially access represented nearly $300,000 in family assets, money that Daniel had earned through legitimate work and careful planning. But I wasn't planning to steal from my own son. That would make me no better than Jessica, and it would destroy the one relationship in this house that still mattered to me. Instead, I was planning something far more sophisticated, a temporary redistribution that would teach Jessica exactly what it felt like to discover that someone you trusted had betrayed that trust in the most personal way possible. The beauty of the plan lay in its mirror image symmetry. Jessica had used her access to my online banking to gradually siphon money for her own purposes. I would use my access to their household information to gradually redirect money for my own purposes, specifically to recover what she'd stolen plus interest, penalties, and what my grandmother would have called aggravation fees. The first step was gaining digital access to Daniel's accounts. This proved easier than expected. Like many couples, Daniel and Jessica shared a computer for household banking, and like many people, Daniel had saved his passwords in the browser for convenience. I found his login credentials for 3 different banks, 2 investment firms, and the credit union where they kept the boys' college funds. But access alone wasn't enough. I needed a method that would delay discovery long enough for me to complete the recovery process while creating a paper trail that would clearly demonstrate Jessica's own crimes. This required what forensic accountants call parallel documentation, creating a record that tells 2 stories simultaneously. I opened new accounts at 2 different banks across town, using my maiden name and my old Phoenix address as the contact information. These would serve as temporary holding accounts, places where redirected funds could sit safely while I documented the transactions and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. I arranged for all statements and communications to be sent electronically to a new email address I created specifically for this purpose. The second step involved creating what I thought of as diversionary complexity. Instead of making large, obvious transfers that might trigger automatic fraud alerts, I would execute dozens of smaller transactions spread across multiple accounts and timeframes. A $500 transfer here, a $300 withdrawal there, a $1,200 movement, disguised as a routine investment rebalancing. Each transaction would be small enough to avoid immediate attention, but large enough to add up quickly. Most importantly, I would use Jessica's own techniques against her. She'd been careful to time her thefts around predictable events: the beginning of the month when my pension arrived, weekends when banks processed fewer transactions, holidays when customer service departments were understaffed. I would follow the same pattern, using her own schedule to mask my activities. The third component of my plan was psychological warfare. Jessica had stolen from me while maintaining a facade of caring concern, pretending to help me while actually exploiting me. I would return the favor by continuing to play the role of grateful, slightly confused grandmother while systematically dismantling her financial security. Every evening at dinner, I would ask about her day, compliment her cooking, and thank her for her kindness, all while knowing that her carefully constructed lifestyle was about to crumble. But the most crucial element was timing. I couldn't simply drain their accounts and disappear. That would make me a criminal and destroy my relationship with Daniel and the boys. Instead, I needed to create a situation where Jessica would discover the missing money in a way that would force her to confront her own crimes. The revelation needed to be public, undeniable, and permanently damaging to her credibility. I decided to use their upcoming anniversary party as the catalyst. Daniel had been planning a surprise celebration for their 6th wedding anniversary, inviting both families and many of their friends for a backyard barbecue. Jessica loved being the center of attention at social gatherings, playing the role of perfect wife and mother, basking in compliments about their beautiful home and successful lifestyle. It would be the ideal moment for her to discover that the money she'd been counting on, the money she'd stolen from me to fund her upgraded lifestyle, was no longer available. The execution phase began on a Monday morning in early May. While Jessica was at her weekly real estate office meeting and Daniel was at work, I logged into his primary savings account and initiated the first transfer, $2,847 to one of my temporary accounts, exactly matching the amount Jessica had stolen from me in April. I documented the transaction with screenshots and printed confirmations, creating a paper trail that would clearly show the timeline and methodology. Over the next 2 weeks, I executed 17 different transactions, each one carefully planned and documented. I moved money between Daniel's various accounts to create confusion, transferred funds to my temporary holdings, and even made a few legitimate investments on his behalf to maintain the appearance of normal financial activity. To any casual observer, the account activity would look like routine money management. Only a detailed forensic analysis would reveal the systematic redirection of funds. The psychological pressure was intense. Every morning at breakfast, I sat across from Jessica as she sipped her coffee and discussed her plans for the day, knowing that I was actively dismantling her financial foundation. Every evening at dinner, I listened to her talk about upcoming purchases and weekend plans, understanding that the money she was counting on would soon be unavailable. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting, but also oddly satisfying. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt like I had agency in my own story. Meanwhile, I continued gathering evidence of Jessica's crimes. I discovered additional fraudulent charges, including a weekend trip to San Diego that she'd told Daniel was a work conference, but had actually paid for using my credit card information. I found online shopping accounts she'd created using variations of my name, P.O. box addresses where packages were delivered, even a social media account where she posted photos of items purchased with my stolen money. By the middle of May, I had recovered $14,300 through my temporary redirections, more than the amount Jessica had stolen, but still less than what I calculated she owed when interest, penalties, and emotional damages were factored in. More importantly, I had created a comprehensive documentary record of both her crimes and my recovery efforts. Every transaction was dated, categorized, and supported, with digital evidence that would be impossible to dispute or explain away. The anniversary party was scheduled for Saturday, May 18th. Daniel had invited 35 people, ordered catering from Jessica's favorite restaurant, and arranged for a bartender and live music. Jessica had spent weeks planning her outfit, preparing the house, and coordinating details with her usual obsessive attention to perfection. She'd even hired a photographer to document their perfect celebration. But perfection, I'd learned during my forensic career, was often just an illusion maintained by hiding inconvenient truths. And some truths, once revealed, could never be hidden again. As I sat in my room that Friday evening, organizing my evidence files one final time, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Robert's death. Anticipation. Tomorrow, Jessica would learn that stealing from a forensic accountant wasn't just unwise, it was educational. She was about to receive a masterclass in the difference between appearing smart and actually being smart. The student, it seemed, was finally ready to become the teacher. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of brilliant Arizona sunshine that makes everything look like it belongs in a magazine. The temperature was already climbing toward 85 degrees by 9 a.m., promising the perfect weather for Daniel's surprise anniversary celebration. I watched through my bedroom window as he arranged patio furniture and tested the sound system, his movements quick and excited like a child preparing for Christmas morning. Jessica had no idea about the party. Daniel had orchestrated an elaborate deception, convincing her that they were having a quiet dinner at home, while secretly coordinating with caterers, musicians, and guests. She'd spent the morning at her usual Saturday yoga class, followed by a nail appointment and hairstyling session, her weekly beauty routine that I now knew was funded partially by my stolen pension money. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a navy blue dress Robert had always loved and the pearl earrings he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. If today was going to be my final performance as the trusting, grateful mother-in-law, I wanted to look the part. More importantly, I wanted to feel strong, grounded in memories of the man who'd taught me that dignity wasn't something others could take away. It was something you chose to maintain regardless of circumstances. The morning passed in a carefully choreographed dance of preparation. Daniel directed delivery crews while trying to keep Jessica from noticing the unusual activity. I helped where I could, arranging flowers and setting up the gift table, all while carrying the weight of what I knew was coming. Every interaction with Jessica felt surreal. Her cheerful chatter about neighborhood gossip and weekend plans, my polite responses and genuine smiles, both of us maintaining facades that would soon be impossible to sustain. Around noon, Jessica's sister Amanda arrived from Tucson, ostensibly for a casual visit, but actually to help with the final party preparations once Jessica left for her supposed errands. Amanda was everything Jessica wasn't: warm, genuine, unpretentious. And watching them together always made me wonder how two people raised in the same family could develop such different relationships with honesty. "Mrs. Harrison, you look beautiful today," Amanda said, hugging me in the kitchen while Jessica was upstairs changing clothes. "I love that dress on you." "Thank you, dear. It was Robert's favorite." I paused, looking at this young woman who would soon learn disturbing truths about her sister. "Amanda, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think people can really change? I mean, fundamentally, at their core." She tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think people can choose to change their behavior, but their basic character? That's usually pretty set by adulthood. Why do you ask?" "Just something I've been thinking about lately. Sometimes we discover that people aren't who we thought they were." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "That's true. But I also think sometimes we learn that people are exactly who they showed us, and we just chose to see something else because it was more comfortable." Her words hit me with unexpected force. Jessica had shown me exactly who she was through dozens of small interactions. The way she spoke about money, her casual assumptions about my naivete, her comfort with deception when it served her purposes. I'd chosen to interpret these signs as harmless personality quirks rather than character flaws, because I needed to believe my son had chosen a good partner. At 2 p.m., Jessica left for what she believed was a grocery shopping trip, but was actually a diversionary errand designed to give us final setup time. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, the house transformed into controlled chaos. Caterers arrived with warming trays and elegant serving dishes. The bartender began setting up his portable bar near the pool. A three-piece jazz ensemble arranged their instruments on the small stage Daniel had constructed near the garden. I found myself assigned to guest coordination, greeting arrivals and directing them to the backyard where they could hide until Jessica returned. Daniel's colleagues from the engineering firm, Jessica's friends from the real estate office, neighbors from their subdivision, even Jessica's parents who'd driven down from Flagstaff, all gathering to celebrate a marriage that was about to face its greatest test. "Margaret, thank you so much for helping with this," said Daniel, squeezing my shoulder as we watched the final preparations. "Jessica's going to be so surprised. I couldn't have pulled this off without you." The irony was almost unbearable. Here was my son, grateful for my assistance in surprising his wife, completely unaware that I was about to deliver a surprise of my own. A surprise that would force him to confront uncomfortable truths about the woman he'd married and the grandmother he'd underestimated. At 3:30, Jessica's car pulled into the driveway. Daniel quickly herded the 35 guests into hiding positions around the backyard, while I positioned myself casually in the kitchen, pretending to read a magazine. The front door opened, and I heard Jessica's voice calling out cheerfully, "Daniel, I'm home! The traffic was terrible, but I got everything on your list." "I'm out back," Daniel called, his voice tight with barely controlled excitement. "Can you come help me with something?" Jessica's heels clicked across the hardwood floors as she walked through the house toward the back patio. I followed at a distance, wanting to witness the moment when she discovered the celebration that would become the backdrop for my own revelation. The surprise worked perfectly. The moment Jessica stepped onto the patio, 35 voices shouted, "Surprise!" and she actually stumbled backward, one hand pressed to her chest in genuine shock. For several seconds, she stood frozen, her mouth open, eyes wide, brain clearly struggling to process the scene before her. Then the performance began. Jessica's face transformed into an expression of delighted amazement as she embraced Daniel, tears streaming down her cheeks as she thanked him for the most wonderful surprise of her life. She moved through the crowd like a professional hostess, hugging friends, thanking guests for coming, exclaiming over every detail Daniel had arranged. I watched her work the party with grudging admiration. She really was talented at manipulation, skilled at reading people and giving them exactly the emotional response they expected. She thanked Daniel's colleagues for their friendship, complimented her real estate friends on their outfits, cooed over the gifts and flowers people had brought. To everyone present, she appeared to be a loving wife overwhelmed by her husband's thoughtfulness. But I knew better. I could see the calculation behind her performance, the way she mentally cataloged which guests might be useful for future business referrals, how she positioned herself for the photographer to capture her best angles. Even in this moment of supposed spontaneous joy, Jessica was working angles and managing impressions. The afternoon progressed beautifully. The jazz trio played softly while guests mingled around the pool and patio. The catered food was excellent. Grilled salmon, herb-crusted chicken, an array of sophisticated side dishes that showcased Daniel's attention to detail. The bartender mixed craft cocktails and served local wines that paired perfectly with the warm weather and festive atmosphere. I moved through the party playing my assigned role, the proud mother-in-law, grateful to be included in such a wonderful celebration. I chatted with Daniel's coworkers about his latest projects, listened to Jessica's friends, discussed real estate market trends, and helped keep the boys entertained when they grew restless with adult conversation. But beneath the surface performance, I was watching and waiting. Around 5 p.m., I noticed Jessica checking her phone more frequently, her smile becoming slightly strained. She was probably monitoring her bank balance for a purchase she planned to make, or checking on a transaction she expected to process. The first signs that something was wrong with her financial world. At 5:30, Jessica disappeared into the house for what she claimed was a bathroom break but lasted nearly 10 minutes. When she returned, her complexion was slightly pale, her smile more forced. She'd definitely discovered something disturbing in her phone's banking app. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Daniel asked, noticing her changed demeanor. "Oh yes, absolutely," Jessica replied quickly, her voice pitched slightly higher than normal. "Just some silly work thing I need to deal with on Monday, nothing that can't wait." But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept darting toward the house where her laptop waited. She was beginning to realize that something was very wrong with their finances, but she couldn't investigate thoroughly without abandoning her own anniversary party. The anticipation was exquisite. After months of feeling powerless and betrayed, after weeks of careful planning and precise execution, the moment was finally approaching when Jessica would understand that she wasn't the only one in this family capable of financial surprise. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that only Arizona could produce, I excused myself from a conversation about neighborhood property values and walked quietly into the house. It was time to prepare for the final act of this performance. In my room, I retrieved the manila folder containing all my evidence: bank statements, transaction records, printed emails, screenshots of Jessica's fraudulent activities, and detailed documentation of my own recovery efforts. Everything organized, labeled, and ready for presentation. The real surprise of the evening was about to begin. The moment arrived at 6:47 p.m., just as the golden hour light was casting long shadows across the backyard, and the jazz trio was beginning their second set. I had been watching Jessica for the past hour, noting how her performance was becoming increasingly strained. She kept excusing herself to check her phone, her laughter sounded more forced with each conversation, and twice I caught her staring into the distance with the kind of unfocused expression that comes from trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I found her in Daniel's home office, hunched over his laptop with her back to the door. Her fingers moved frantically across the keyboard as she navigated between multiple banking websites, her breathing shallow and quick. From where I stood, I could see the numbers on the screen: account balances that didn't match her expectations, transaction histories that told stories she couldn't explain. "Finding everything you're looking for?" I asked quietly, stepping into the room and closing the door behind me. Jessica spun around so quickly she nearly knocked over Daniel's coffee mug. Her face was flushed, her carefully styled hair slightly disheveled from running her hands through it. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely rattled. "Oh, Mom Harrison, you startled me. I was just..." She gestured vaguely at the computer screen. "There's some kind of error with our bank accounts. Numbers that don't add up. I'm sure it's just a computer glitch or something." "Computer glitch," I repeated, nodding thoughtfully as I moved closer to the desk. "That's interesting. I've been having some computer glitches myself lately. Would you like to compare notes?" Something in my tone must have alerted her because Jessica's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. She closed the laptop with a decisive snap and stood up, smoothing her dress and attempting to reassemble her composure. "I should get back to the party," she said, moving toward the door. "Daniel will wonder where I am." "Daniel will be fine," I said, not moving from my position, blocking her path. "The guests are enjoying themselves, the boys are playing in the pool, and everyone thinks you're just taking a moment to freshen up. We have time for a conversation." "About what?" Her voice carried the first edge of defensiveness I'd ever heard from her. I opened the manila folder I'd been carrying and placed it on Daniel's desk. "About $11,847 in unauthorized transactions from my pension and savings accounts. About online shopping accounts created using my personal information. About weekend trips to San Diego charged to my credit card. About the interesting difference between computer glitches and deliberate theft." The color drained from Jessica's face so completely I thought she might faint. She gripped the edge of the desk for support, her knuckles white against the dark wood. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was the distant laughter from the party and the gentle hum of the air conditioning. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but her voice lacked any conviction. "Of course you do." I pulled out the first document, a detailed transaction history showing her fraudulent purchases. Style Crave Boutique, April 3rd, $89.99. Desert Rose Spa, April 12th, $203.50. The Westin San Diego, April 20th through 22nd, $847 for a weekend you told Daniel was a work conference. With each item I listed, Jessica seemed to shrink smaller. The confident, polished woman who'd been working the party crowd was disappearing, replaced by someone who looked young and desperate and caught. "You don't understand," she said finally. "It's not what it looks like. I was going to pay it back. I just we needed. Things have been tight lately, and I thought." "You thought an elderly widow wouldn't notice someone stealing her retirement income?" I interrupted. "You thought 40 years of forensic accounting experience would just evaporate because I needed help setting up online banking?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed without sound. She was experiencing what I'd seen dozens of times in interrogation rooms, the moment when someone realizes their carefully constructed lies are crumbling and they have no backup plan. "How long have you been planning this?" I continued, pulling out more documents. "Did you start researching financial elder abuse before or after Daniel suggested I move in? Were you already looking for ways to access my accounts when you offered to help me with the technology?" "Stop," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just stop. I'll stop when you explain to me how someone who claims to love my son could systematically steal from his mother while living in the same house, sharing the same meals, watching me babysit their children." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Outside, Daniel's laughter carried through the window as he told some story to his engineering colleagues. The jazz trio had switched to a slower song, something romantic and sweet that made the contrast with our conversation even more stark. "You want to know the truth?" Jessica said suddenly, her voice gaining strength through anger. "The truth is that you moving in here was a financial disaster for us. Your medical needs, your special dietary requirements, the way you take over our space and our routines. Daniel sees it as helping his mother, but I see the real cost." "The real cost," I repeated. "Please elaborate." "We had to renovate the guest suite. I had to hire additional housekeeping because everything needs to be perfect when you're around. I've lost clients because I can't show houses during school hours, since you can't handle pickup duties every day. My income has dropped, and Daniel doesn't see it because he's at work all day. So you decided to compensate yourself by stealing my pension." "I decided to reallocate some resources," Jessica said, her voice taking on the practiced smoothness she used with difficult real estate clients. "You have more money than you need, sitting in accounts you barely monitor. We have expenses you don't see and responsibilities you don't understand." The audacity was breathtaking. She'd created a complete narrative where she was the victim and I was somehow complicit in my own victimization. It was masterful manipulation, the kind of gaslighting that might have worked on someone with less professional experience in dealing with white-collar criminals. "Reallocate resources," I said slowly. "Is that what we're calling grand theft now?" "It's not theft if I intended to pay it back. With what money? Your declining real estate commissions? Daniel's salary that you've been secretly supplementing with my pension?" Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally a kind of resigned defeat. She sank into Daniel's desk chair and stared at her hands. "How much do you know?" she asked quietly. "I know everything." I pulled out the final document, my detailed accounting of the money I'd recovered from their accounts. "I know about every fraudulent transaction, every forged authorization, every lie you told to cover your tracks. But more importantly, I know about the $14,300 I've recovered from Daniel's accounts over the past 2 weeks. Jessica's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about applying your own methods to your own finances. Small transfers, careful timing, electronic transactions that look routine until someone examines them closely." I placed the transaction summary in front of her. 17 different movements of funds from your family accounts to temporary holdings I established, using the same techniques you used to steal from me. You can't just take our money." "I didn't take it. I reallocated resources, just like you did. The difference is that I documented everything meticulously, and I'm prepared to return every penny once we reach an understanding about restitution for your crimes." Jessica stared at the papers in front of her, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "Daniel will never forgive me. If he finds out about this, it will destroy our marriage. That's up to you, I said. You have a choice to make, and you need to make it right now, while our guests are still enjoying their anniversary celebration. What kind of choice? I pulled out a single sheet of paper I'd prepared that morning, a simple agreement written in language any real estate agent would understand. You can sign this confession and restitution agreement, which includes full repayment of the money you stole, plus interest and penalties. You can agree to seek professional help for what appears to be a serious problem with impulse control and financial boundaries. And you can commit to never accessing my financial information again. And if I don't sign, then I call the police right now, while your parents and your sister and all your friends are here to witness your arrest for elder financial abuse. I present my evidence to the district attorney on Monday morning, and you face criminal charges that will end your real estate license and probably your marriage. Jessica picked up the agreement with trembling hands. As she read through the terms, I could see her mind working, calculating alternatives, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. This is blackmail, she said finally. This is justice, I corrected. The question is whether you want private justice or public justice. But you're gonna get one or the other, starting right now. Outside, the party continued in blissful ignorance of the drama unfolding just a few yards away. Daniel was probably starting to wonder where both his wife and his mother had disappeared to, but he'd assume we were handling some domestic detail or sharing a private conversation. He had no idea that his anniversary party was about to become the most honest conversation his marriage had ever seen. Jessica stared at the confession document for what felt like an eternity, her eyes moving back and forth across the legal language as if she could find some loophole hidden in the carefully worded paragraphs. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the paper, and I could practically hear the calculations running through her mind, weighing her options, measuring consequences, searching for any alternative to the impossible choice I'd presented. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Until the party ends," I replied, settling into the chair across from Daniel's desk. "When the last guest leaves, you either hand me a signed confession, or I hand Daniel a complete accounting of what his wife has been doing with his mother's pension money." "You're really going to destroy our family over this?" "Jessica, you destroyed your family the moment you decided to steal from me. I'm just making the destruction visible." She set the paper down and looked at me with something that might have been desperation or might have been calculation. With Jessica, it was always difficult to tell the difference. "There has to be another way, some kind of arrangement we can work out privately." "There is. It's called signing the confession and making full restitution. I don't have $11,847 just sitting around. My commission income has been down. Our expenses are higher than Daniel realizes, and you thought stealing from an elderly woman was a reasonable solution to your cash flow problems." I leaned forward slightly. "Jessica, let me explain something about consequences. When you steal from someone, you don't get to negotiate the terms of making it right. You don't get to payment plans or installment agreements. You return what you stole, plus interest, plus penalties, plus whatever it costs to make your victim whole again. But there are no buts, there are no excuses. There are no sob stories about your business being down or your expenses being up. You made a choice to commit crimes against a family member who trusted you. Now you face the consequences of that choice." Outside, the party had shifted into its evening phase. The jazz trio was playing something soft and romantic, while couples swayed together near the pool. I could hear Daniel's distinctive laugh as he told stories to his college friends, completely unaware that his wife was sitting 20 feet away contemplating the end of life as she knew it. Jessica picked up the confession again, reading through the terms more carefully this time. The agreement was straightforward but comprehensive: full admission of guilt, complete restitution within 30 days, mandatory financial counseling, and a formal promise never to access my accounts or personal information again. If she violated any term, I reserved the right to pursue criminal charges immediately. "The money you took from Daniel's accounts," she said suddenly. "When do I get that back?" "When you fulfilled every term of this agreement. Think of it as collateral, ensuring your compliance with the restitution schedule. That's our children's college fund. That's Daniel's retirement savings. And my pension was my retirement security. The difference is that I'm offering you a path to get your money back. You offered me no such courtesy." Jessica's face cycled through a range of emotions: anger, fear, resentment, and something that might have been genuine regret. She was experiencing the full weight of having her financial security suddenly compromised by someone she'd underestimated. And the irony wasn't lost on either of us. "If I sign this," she said slowly, "how do I know you won't just take the confession to Daniel anyway? How do I know this isn't just another way to humiliate me? Because unlike you, I keep my word. If you sign that document and honor its terms, Daniel never needs to know about any of this. Your marriage stays intact, your reputation remains undamaged, and your children never have to learn that their mother is a thief. And if I don't sign, then in about 10 minutes I walk out to that party and ask Daniel to join us for a family discussion about financial transparency. I present my evidence in front of your parents, your sister, your friends, and anyone else who wants to listen. Your arrest will probably make the local news. Real estate agent charged with elder financial abuse. Your real estate license will be suspended pending investigation. Your marriage will end. Your children will grow up knowing their mother chose crime over integrity." The silence that followed was punctuated by the sounds of celebration from the backyard: laughter, conversation, the gentle splash of someone jumping into the pool. It was the sound of normal family life, the kind of life Jessica could still preserve if she made the right choice in the next few minutes. "I need to use the bathroom," she said suddenly, standing up so quickly the chair rolled backward. "You have 5 minutes," I replied. "And Jessica, don't even think about trying to leave through the front door. I've been watching for attempted flight patterns for 40 years. You won't make it to your car." She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "You really would do it, wouldn't you? You'd destroy everything just to get your money back." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm revealing what's already been destroyed. The question is whether you want to rebuild or let it all collapse publicly." Jessica left the room, and I used the quiet moment to organize my thoughts and review my evidence one final time. Everything was documented, every transaction tracked, every lie cataloged. If this went to criminal court, the case would be airtight. Jessica was smart enough to know that, which meant she was probably in the bathroom weighing the certainty of private humiliation against the possibility of public disgrace. Through the office window, I could see Daniel near the pool, his arm around his father-in-law as they watched the boys play Marco Polo in the shallow end. He looked happy, relaxed, proud of the celebration he'd orchestrated for his wife. In a few minutes, I might have to destroy that happiness by revealing truths that would fundamentally change how he saw the woman he'd married. But that choice belonged to Jessica now, not to me. She returned exactly 4 minutes later, her makeup refreshed, and her composure partially restored. She'd taken the time to practice her expression in the bathroom mirror, I realized, the same way she probably practiced her performance face before meeting difficult real estate clients. "I have conditions," she announced, sitting back down across from me. "You're not in a position to negotiate conditions. Just hear me out." She pulled a pen from Daniel's desk drawer. "I'll sign your confession, and I'll make full restitution. But I want the repayment schedule spread over 6 months instead of 30 days, and I want your promise that if I fulfill every term exactly as written, you'll never mention this to Daniel. 30 days for restitution is non-negotiable. You had access to $11,847 worth of my money over 4 months. You can find $11,847 worth of repayment in 30 days. And the confidentiality agreement?" I considered this carefully. Jessica was asking for something I'd already planned to give her, but she didn't need to know that. "If you fulfill every single term of this agreement, full restitution, financial counseling, and absolutely no further contact with my accounts, then yes, Daniel never needs to know his wife is a thief. But if you violate even the smallest detail, if you're late with a single payment, or if I find out you've accessed my information again, then all bets are off." "Fair enough." She clicked the pen and positioned it over the signature line. "But I want you to know something, Mom Harrison. I'm not sorry about the money. You have more than you need, and we're struggling more than Daniel knows. I'm only sorry I got caught." "Thank you for that honesty," I replied. "It confirms that I'm making the right choice in not trusting your rehabilitation." Jessica signed her name with a firm, deliberate stroke, the document that would either save her marriage or serve as evidence in her criminal trial, depending on her choices over the next 30 days. I collected the signed confession and placed it carefully in my folder. The first payment is due in exactly 1 week, $2,961.75, representing 1/4 of the total restitution. You can deliver it to me personally or transfer it to my account, the same account you've been stealing from. And our money will be returned proportionally as you meet each payment deadline. Think of it as an incentive program. Jessica stood up, smoothing her dress one final time. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob, and for a moment I thought she might say something else. An apology, perhaps, or another attempt at justification. Instead, she simply opened the door and walked back toward the party, ready to resume her performance as the loving wife celebrating her anniversary. Ready to pretend that the last 30 minutes had never happened, that her marriage wasn't now balanced on the edge of a signed confession, that her financial future wasn't entirely dependent on honoring an agreement with the woman she'd tried to steal from. I gave her a 5-minute head start before rejoining the celebration myself. After all, it really was a lovely party, and Daniel had worked so hard to make everything perfect. It would be a shame to let his efforts go unappreciated. The remainder of the anniversary party became a masterclass in psychological theater. When I rejoined the celebration 5 minutes after Jessica, I found her standing near the gift table, with Daniel's arm around her waist, accepting congratulations from his engineering colleagues, with what appeared to be genuine joy and gratitude. If I hadn't just watched her sign a confession to financial crimes, I might have believed the performance myself. "There you are, Mom," Daniel said, pulling me into their small circle. "Jessica was just telling everyone about the amazing party planning help you gave me. She says she never suspected a thing." "Your mother has excellent timing," Jessica replied, her smile bright and seemingly authentic. "She kept me distracted all morning with the perfect combination of casual conversation and household projects. I had no idea you were orchestrating something this elaborate." The ease with which she lied was breathtaking. Here she stood, less than 10 minutes after signing a confession to stealing nearly $12,000 from me, chatting cheerfully about party planning and expressing gratitude for my help. It was sociopathy disguised as social grace, and I found myself marveling at her complete comfort with deception. "Well, I learned from the best," I replied, meeting her eyes directly. "Sometimes the most important conversations happen when people least expect them." Jessica's smile flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression that only someone looking for it would catch, before returning to full wattage. "Absolutely. Timing really is everything, isn't it?" Daniel, oblivious to the subtext crackling between his wife and mother, beamed at both of us. "I'm just grateful to have two such important women in my life getting along so well. Some guys aren't this lucky with their family dynamics." "We understand each other perfectly," Jessica said, her voice warm with what sounded like genuine affection. "Don't we, Mom Harrison?" "We certainly do now," I agreed. The evening continued with an almost surreal quality. Jessica moved through the party like a seasoned politician, working every conversation with practiced skill while I watched from various vantage points, studying her technique. She thanked Daniel's boss for promoting him to senior project manager, complimented her real estate colleagues on their recent sales, and charmed Daniel's college friends with stories about their early dating years. But I noticed things others missed. The way she checked her phone compulsively, probably monitoring bank balances and trying to calculate how quickly she could access funds for the first payment. The slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking. The way she avoided direct eye contact with me unless other people were watching. Around 8 p.m., as the sun finally disappeared behind the mountains and the patio lights created a warm amber glow over the celebration, Jessica's parents approached me near the dessert table. Robert and Patricia Chen were in their early 70s, retired teachers who'd driven down from Flagstaff for the surprise party. "Margaret, this is such a wonderful celebration," Patricia said, sampling the chocolate cake Daniel had ordered from Jessica's favorite bakery. "You must be so proud of how well Daniel and Jessica work together as a team." "They certainly complement each other," I replied carefully. "Jessica has some very unique talents." "She's always been resourceful," Robert added. "Even as a child, she could find creative solutions to problems that would stump adults." Very innovative thinking. I nearly choked on my wine. Innovative was certainly one way to describe financial fraud, though probably not what Jessica's father had in mind. "How are you adjusting to living with them?" Patricia continued. It can't be easy, sharing space after so many years of independence. It's been educational, I said. I've learned things about family dynamics I never would have discovered otherwise. Some lessons are more valuable than others. Patricia nodded sympathetically. The adjustment period is always challenging. But Jessica speaks so highly of you. She says you've been tremendously helpful with the boys and around the house. She's mentioned that, has she? Oh yes, just this afternoon she was telling Amanda how grateful she is for your support. She said having you here has made such a positive difference in their family finances. Fewer babysitting costs, help with household management, that sort of thing. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Jessica had been telling her family that my presence was helping their finances while simultaneously stealing my pension to fund her lifestyle. She'd turned my victimization into a talking point about my usefulness. Family finances can be complicated, I observed. Sometimes people have very different ideas about sharing resources and responsibilities. That's certainly true, Robert agreed. We raised Jessica to be independent and self-sufficient. But we also taught her the importance of taking care of family members who need support. I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. Jessica had definitely learned to take care of herself using family members who needed support, just not in the way her parents intended. As the evening progressed, I found myself in several conversations that took on new meaning given what I now knew about Jessica's financial situation. Her real estate colleagues mentioned how impressed they were with her recent lifestyle upgrades, the new car, the designer clothes, the expensive spa treatments she'd been posting about on social media. Business must be really good, commented a woman named Sarah from Jessica's office. She's been treating herself to some well-deserved luxuries lately. Jessica works very hard, I replied diplomatically. She's certainly found creative ways to fund her lifestyle choices. Another colleague, a man named Brad, who specialized in commercial properties, mentioned seeing Jessica at several high-end restaurants around Scottsdale. Usually with clients, of course, but always at the kinds of places that show you're doing well in this business. Image matters in real estate. Image can be expensive to maintain, I noted. True, but Jessica seems to have figured out how to balance her investments in client relationships with her personal budget. Smart business strategy. If only he knew where that personal budget was actually coming from. The most telling conversation happened around 9 p.m., when Amanda pulled me aside near the pool where we could speak privately. Jessica's sister had been watching her all evening, with the kind of concerned attention that suggested she'd noticed something others had missed. Mrs. Harrison, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Has Jessica seemed different to you lately? More stressed than usual, maybe? She's been acting strange all evening, like she's trying too hard to appear normal. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes when people are carrying heavy burdens, they overcompensate in social situations. They perform happiness instead of feeling it. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what it looks like. A performance. And the weird thing is, she's usually so natural at these kinds of events. But tonight she seems like she's following a script. People react differently when they're facing difficult decisions, I said. Sometimes the pressure of keeping up appearances becomes overwhelming. You think she's having problems? Financial problems, maybe? I know the real estate market has been challenging lately. I think Jessica is dealing with some significant challenges that require her to make some important choices about her priorities and her integrity. Amanda studied my face carefully. You know something, don't you? Something you're not telling me. I know that your sister is at a crossroads, I replied. The path she chooses over the next few weeks will determine what kind of person she becomes, and what kind of future she has with Daniel and the boys. Should I be worried about her? You should be hopeful that she makes the right choices going forward. As the party began winding down around 10 p.m., guests started collecting their purses and saying their goodbyes. Jessica threw herself into the farewell process with the same theatrical energy she'd maintained all evening, hugging friends, thanking everyone for coming, and expressing amazement at Daniel's thoughtfulness. I watched Daniel throughout these interactions, noting his genuine pride in his wife's happiness and his satisfaction with the evening's success. He had no idea that his anniversary celebration had also served as the backdrop for his wife's confession to financial crimes against his mother. He had no idea that the woman he was embracing so lovingly had just signed an agreement that could either save or destroy their marriage, depending on her compliance over the next 30 days. As the last guests departed and the catering staff finished cleaning up, the 4 adults and 2 sleepy children gathered in the living room for a final toast. Daniel raised his glass of champagne and looked around at his family with obvious contentment. "To the best surprise party ever organized, the best mother who helped make it happen, and the best wife a man could ask for," he said. "Here's to many more years of happiness together." Jessica clinked her glass against his with a smile that looked both beautiful and brittle. "To family," she said, her eyes finding mine across the room. "And to understanding that actions have consequences." "To family," I agreed, meeting her gaze steadily. "And to the importance of honoring our commitments to each other." It was a toast that meant different things to each of us. For Daniel, it was a celebration of love and successful planning. For Jessica, it was acknowledgement of the trap she'd walked into and the price she'd agreed to pay. For me, it was recognition that justice sometimes comes wrapped in anniversary gifts, and that the most important lessons are often learned when people least expect them. The performance was over. Now came the real test of whether Jessica would honor her signed commitment or force me to reveal everything to the family that still trusted her. 7 days until the first payment was due. 7 days to see if a master manipulator could learn to keep her word. The week following the anniversary party felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Every morning brought the same routine. Jessica leaving early for client meetings that I suspected were actually frantic attempts to raise money, Daniel heading to work with his usual cheerful obliviousness, and me maintaining the facade of helpful grandmother while counting down the hours until Jessica's first payment deadline. She avoided me with impressive skill during those 7 days. When I was in the kitchen, she found urgent business elsewhere. When I sat by the pool with the boys, she discovered pressing phone calls that required privacy. Our only direct interactions happened during family dinners, where she performed her role as grateful daughter-in-law with the same theatrical precision she displayed at the party. But I noticed the signs of stress accumulating beneath her polished exterior, dark circles under her eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't fully hide. The way she checked her phone obsessively, sometimes every few minutes. The forced brightness in her voice when talking to Daniel about her workday. She was living on borrowed time with borrowed money, and the weight of that reality was becoming harder to disguise. On Thursday, 3 days before the payment deadline, Jessica finally broke her pattern of avoidance. I was reading in my room when she knocked softly on the doorframe, the first time she'd willingly sought me out since signing the confession. "Mom Harrison? Could we talk for a moment?" "Of course." I set down my book and gestured to the chair across from me. "What's on your mind?" She closed the door and sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been working on getting your money together, but I need a little more time. The real estate market is slow right now, and I have several deals that are close to closing but haven't finalized yet." "The deadline is Sunday at midnight," I replied calmly. "That was clearly stated in the agreement you signed." "I understand that, but I'm asking for a short extension. Maybe 2 weeks? I've got 3 potential sales that could close by then, and I'd be able to make not just the first payment, but possibly pay off the entire amount." I studied her face carefully. Everything about her request sounded reasonable on the surface, but Jessica had already proven herself to be a sophisticated liar. More importantly, she'd shown no genuine remorse for her crimes, only regret at being caught. "Jessica, let me ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. If our situations were reversed, if you had discovered that I was stealing from your family's accounts, would you grant me an extension on returning the money I'd stolen?" She opened her mouth to respond quickly, then paused, clearly recognizing the trap in the question. "That's different. You wouldn't steal from us." "Why wouldn't I?" Because you're not that kind of person." "And what kind of person are you?" The silence stretched between us for nearly a minute. Jessica's face went through a series of micro-expressions. Calculation, frustration, something that might have been shame, before settling into resignation. "I'm the kind of person who made a terrible mistake and is trying to fix it," she said finally. "No," I corrected gently. "You're the kind of person who committed deliberate crimes over a period of months and is now trying to negotiate better terms for the consequences. There's a significant difference." "So that's it? No extension, no flexibility, no consideration for the fact that I'm genuinely trying to make this right?" "Jessica, you had 4 months to make this right, voluntarily. You had dozens of opportunities to stop stealing from me, to confess what you'd done, to work out a repayment plan before I discovered your crimes. You chose not to take any of those opportunities. Now you follow the agreement you signed, or you face the criminal charges I'm prepared to file. She stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking. You really are going to destroy our family over this, aren't you? You're going to ruin my marriage, hurt those boys, tear apart everything Daniel has worked for, all because you can't show a little understanding about a temporary financial situation. I'm not destroying anything, I said, rising to meet her at eye level. You destroyed your family's trust the moment you decided to steal from me. You destroyed your marriage's foundation when you chose crime over honesty. You hurt those boys when you prioritized your lifestyle upgrades over their security. I'm simply revealing the destruction you've already caused. Daniel will never forgive you for this. Maybe not, but at least he'll know the truth about what kind of woman he married. Jessica left my room without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames on my dresser. For the next 3 days, she didn't speak to me at all, not even the polite pleasantries she'd maintained since the party. During family dinners, she directed all her conversation to Daniel and the boys, acting as though I didn't exist. Daniel noticed the change, but misinterpreted its significance. On Saturday evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, he approached me with obvious concern. Mom, did something happen between you and Jessica? She's been acting strange all week, and tonight she seemed almost hostile toward you. People sometimes reveal their true feelings when they're under pressure, I replied, choosing my words carefully. Jessica is dealing with some difficult situations right now. What kind of situations? Is there something I should know about? I paused in loading the dishwasher, considering how to respond. In less than 24 hours, I would either receive Jessica's payment or begin the process of destroying their marriage. Daniel deserved to know the truth, but I'd given Jessica my word that I would maintain confidentiality if she honored the agreement. Ask Jessica, I said finally. If there's something you need to know about your family's situation, she's the one who should tell you. Sunday arrived with typical Arizona intensity, brilliant sunshine and temperatures already climbing toward triple digits by mid-morning. I spent the day in careful observation, watching Jessica's behavior for any sign of her intentions. She was quieter than usual, distracted during the boys' soccer games, short-tempered with normal household disruptions. At 6 p.m., she disappeared into Daniel's office and stayed there for over an hour. I could hear her on the phone, her voice rising and falling in what sounded like increasingly desperate negotiations. When she finally emerged, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. Midnight approached with no communication from Jessica. I sat in my room, fully dressed, with my laptop open and my phone beside me. The signed confession was in a manila envelope, ready to be presented to Daniel. The evidence files were organized and printed. My attorney's contact information was programmed into my phone's speed dial. At 11:47 p.m., there was a soft knock on my door. It's open, I called. Jessica entered carrying a cashier's check and a bank statement. She placed both documents on my dresser without making eye contact. $2,961.75, she said quietly. The first quarter payment, as agreed. I examined the cashier's check carefully. It was legitimate, drawn on their joint checking account, made out to me in the exact amount specified in our agreement. Thank you, I said. Your next payment is due in 7 days. I know. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Mom Harrison? I want you to know that I liquidated the boys' college fund to make this payment. Michael and Tyler's education savings, 4 years of careful planning and sacrifice, gone because of what I did. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just paying with her own resources, she was sacrificing her children's future to cover her crimes. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I want you to understand the full cost of your justice. Those boys will grow up with fewer opportunities because their grandmother demanded immediate repayment for money that was always going to be returned. Jessica? No, let me finish. You've won. You've gotten your money back, you've humiliated me, you've taught me whatever lesson you thought I needed to learn. But in 6 years, When Michael and Tyler are applying to colleges and we're scrambling to find financial aid for schools we could have afforded if their education funds still existed, I want you to remember that your need for revenge was more important than their futures. She left before I could respond, closing the door with quiet finality. I sat alone in my room, holding the cashier's check and feeling something I hadn't expected: doubt. Had I been too harsh? Too inflexible? Had my desire for justice overridden my concern for the innocent victims, my own grandchildren, who would suffer from Jessica's crimes and my consequences? But then I remembered the months of theft, the casual cruelty of her justifications, her complete lack of remorse even when signing the confession. Jessica was using her children's suffering as a weapon against me, the same way she'd used my trust as a tool for theft. I picked up my laptop and transferred $6,500, the amount I estimated the boys' college fund had contained, to a new education savings account I established in their names. If Jessica thought she could manipulate me with their future welfare, she was about to learn that some grandmothers planned several moves ahead. The next morning, I presented Daniel with the college fund documentation over breakfast. "What's this?" he asked, examining the paperwork. "A gift for the boys' education." It occurred to me that with Jessica's business being slow lately, you might be worried about their college savings. Daniel's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, gratitude, and finally something that looked like suspicion. "Mom, this is incredibly generous, but we have their education covered. Jessica and I have been saving for years." "Check your accounts," I suggested gently. "Make sure everything is where you think it is." He pulled out his phone and logged into their banking app. I watched his face change as he scrolled through their account balances, seeing the depleted college fund, the reduced savings, the financial devastation Jessica had hidden from him. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "Where did the money go?" I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Ask your wife, Daniel. Ask her to explain the difference between what you thought you had and what you actually have. Ask her to tell you the truth about what she's been doing with your family's money. You know something. You know what happened. I know that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. I know that financial betrayal can destroy a family faster than almost anything else. And I know that you deserve to hear the truth from the person who betrayed you." Daniel stared at his phone screen for a long time, processing the implications of what he was seeing. Finally, he looked up at me with eyes that held the first glimmer of understanding. "Jessica," he said quietly. "Jessica," I confirmed. The confrontation that followed would be between husband and wife, not mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. My role in this story was finished. I had recovered my stolen money, protected my grandchildren's futures, and ensured that truth finally had a voice in a house that had been built on lies. Justice, I learned, sometimes comes at the cost of family dinners and comfortable illusions. But it's a price worth paying when the alternative is living as a victim in your own life. Some lessons are too important to be taught gently. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.